were there any indications for why some boys were able to resist that idea to put on that mask or to pretend that they're more men that they were? They just wanted to watch a musical or be in a school play, or was there any indication of why one would put on a show and others would just be themselves?
Yeah, I'll go through those three categories. So first, those that ended up resisting, it was a self-led process. They didn't like the internal conflict between what they felt was authentically them and what the pressures or the mask forced them to be like. And so they really just grew tired and discomforting of that. And so that ties in with the second factor, is that they had enough confidence to try and be more authentically themselves without fear, or with some fear perhaps, but their desire to be authentic outweighed their fear of fitting in.
Okay. And
And
I guess
so,
it depends on the environment. If you have some really shitty environment with some specific bullies that are going to bully anybody that wears a salmon shirt to school, then I guess that will enforce that, I would imagine.
yeah, and that's why I think what's really fascinating is that what I've seen as a teacher and what I saw in my research is that generally by the later high school years, there's less, obviously bullying can still happen throughout, but there's less, like, kind of, there's more time for maturation and people themselves a bit alone. Like in grade 12, often teenagers talk about how, like, yeah, kids I never hung out with because they weren't cool enough. It's kind of like, oh, they're cool in their own way, and there's a bit more maturation that happens by the late years that gives people a bit more freedom to be themselves. But at the same time, you have boys in my research who are like, yeah, in my 4 years of high school, I've started to forget about my super emotional self. And so you can start buying into the mask as being authentically you. And then this ties into those that reluctantly adhered. Those that reluctantly adhered did not like the masculine pressures, but they also, their fear of being alone and ostracized was from their friends. What was their biggest fear? That they,
Right.
yeah, they didn't think that they could be themselves without losing their friendships, and that mattered more to them, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you have those that willingly adhered, and these were the category of boys that were like, this is what I need to do to become a man, so I don't view any incongruity between who I am and what these pressures are, because these pressures are telling me the way to be. And so, great, I have direction. I should be emotionally stoic, um, in all of these areas. And so, yeah, you have different levels and different categories of boys and why they do not, or don't even want to resist.
Right. Well, let's go back to something you said earlier in our chat, where you said something like something that provoked you to want to go into this area of study was 81% or something of kids around this age that had either mental health problems or acting out problems. I can't remember what you said
Diagnosed
that
with
they were.
emotional behavioral disorders.
Okay, and they were all boys, and so I wonder, because in what I how I think about this is that, is this because we're judging all boys around that age on the level of goodness on if they're acting like girls or not, like, or are these actually emotional disturbances that actually need some psychiatric help or some actually some mental health attention,
Mm.
or like are these just boys being boys?
I definitely think they're in need of support, but what you highlighted is really important, is that I think that stat is due to an overdiagnosis of boys as well as an underdiagnosis of girls. For instance, boys tend to display more externalizing behaviors, behaviors that act out, that get more notice and attention from teachers, and girls tend to have more internalizing behaviors, more withdrawnness, and this equally harms boys and girls because girls are being missed, because girls are more expected and are more compliant often in school to be studious, do what the teacher tells you to do. And so if they're just withdrawn, they're not causing a fuss, the non-squeaky wheel doesn't get the grease, and then sometimes the boys who have more externalizing behaviors do get the grease, but not necessarily the attuned grease that they need. Sometimes that gets misapplied as well. So I think it goes both
Interesting.
ways.
So if I'm understanding correctly, so if boys are acting out because they are depressed or they're, excuse me, or they're anxious or etc., they're just treated like they're misbehaving and they're angry. Maybe they get expelled, like all of these things. Whereas if a girl would have done it, she would get more care and nurturing and attunement. Is that right?
Not
Theoretically.
necessarily. The girl, if because girls tend to do more internalizing behavior, they just get missed.
Right. But
Um,
I'm saying if they were to act out in some way, that they would be treated like, oh, maybe something's wrong and they get attunement and care, where boys get maybe suspended.
I don't know if I would say that, because there's also a number of things that if a girl acts out, um, and to be honest, like the rate of girls acting out aggressively in schools is increasing over time.
Hmm.
So yeah, I won't say that because I don't know enough research to confidently say what people's reactions are to girls acting out. I know that sometimes it can go both ways. Sometimes yes, they might get more care or more, but also I could see them getting more judgment because that's more improper for a girl to act out as, and so
Right. That's fair.
it's
Yeah, because I've seen some study that said, like under the same circumstances, a lot more boys will get suspended and reprimanded for the exact same things as girls in high school, for example. And I don't think anyone knows why that is. If it's because the bias towards caring for girls and punishing boys, or because teaching is a mostly a female dominated profession